Hello there, Outliers. Niiamah Ashong here, and thank you so very much for letting us be a part of your journey. Today, we are here on the Outliers Edge Roundtable, and we have Maria Ross to really dive in to really see an edge from a perspective that shows up if you're paying attention underneath the conversations that we have here. But what I really appreciate about Maria is that she's gone all in to not just acknowledge it, but to codify it, to distill it, and to also make sure that we are able to leverage it inside of our own businesses and beyond. What's that it? Well, let me bring in Maria just a bit here to introduce yourself, and then we'll find out more about it. So, Maria, would you mind letting us know more about you and the game that you're playing?
Yeah, sure. I'm an author, a speaker, a strategist, and an empathy advocate. And I basically help forward-thinking leaders and organizations and teams and brands leverage empathy and strengthen empathy to achieve radical success.
Yeah, so I love this year. We were just talking about this year, but I have a background in human capital, been in HR and HR related things my entire career. And so when you bring in empathy and using it to leverage for success, I
Mhm.
like it on two elements. One of them is just like I'm bought in, I believe, you know. But on the other side of it too, it's like it's something that isn't that common to be able to put out in terms of like how a business or how an organization can gain success. And
Mhm.
so I'm going to want to explore a couple things from that perspective. Why don't we start out first and just get a chance to understand like how does empathy play out as a strength for you or for the organizations that you lead? If someone was a leader out there and
Mhm.
they hear empathy, like
Mhm.
what is it that they may not understand or may not
Yeah.
maybe missing from it?
Yeah, I mean, most of my career was spent in management consulting and as a marketing executive, and then running my own brand strategy consulting firm. And the secret ingredient of being an effective marketer is empathy. It's basically understanding who your customers are, what they care about, what motivates them, what do they fear, what do they value, and leveraging that not to manipulate, but to create a connection. The goal is to connect and engage. And so I had been doing that work, and I had been, writing books about that and marketing and all of that kind of stuff. And then I really dove deep into the concept of empathy, started researching it as a strategic advantage in 2016. And it was partly because I saw a lot of behaviors from leaders and from companies that were the antithesis of the things that I was trying to teach my son about how to operate in the world with empathy and compassion and collaboration. So I did what I do, which is I've got to prove them wrong, right? And I was like, there's got to be leaders and brands winning with empathy that we just don't shine enough of a light on. And to my delight, there was all the data, all the research that showed that when you have an empathetic leader and you have an empathetic organization and even an empathetic brand from a customer perspective, you boost engagement, performance, retention, loyalty, innovation. From the internal perspective, you lower attrition, you increase engagement, you increase loyalty, referrals, all of that. From a customer perspective, you are able to be with a brand and be loyal to a brand through good times and bad. In fact, there was a study that came out in 2024 that 82% of customers expect a human connection with the brands they do business with. So this is really important for us in the age of AI, where we're running to this, oh, we're going to replace everybody with AI. It's like, no, the human skills are going to be really important. What we need to outsource are the rote tasks that take us away from creating those connections and that engagement with people. But we can't lose that because that's our competitive advantage. So I wrote a book called The Empathy Edge previously that was the business case for empathy and what the ROI was. And then I did a follow-up book that came out last fall called The Empathy Dilemma, which was all about helping those leaders who were convinced, like you, like they're bought in, but they were like, here's where it gets hard. Here's how the struggle I'm having with balancing the needs of the business with the needs of my people. And so that latest book really provides a framework for people. So, kind of with that background, one of the things that I tackled early on was, what do we even mean by empathy? Because it's very misunderstood. There's a lot of false narratives out there. And there's a lot of definitions as well because
You
it's
know exactly
changed.
where I was like where I was headed because I was like
Yeah.
I'm feeling this here. Do you mind? You just mentioned two books. I want to make sure I call this out for Trailblazers here. So Trailblazers, as you're listening to this, I'm actually going to invite you to go get both of these books here. And the reason I'm going to say that here is for twofold. One, from the standpoint of the empathy component, but Maria, what I also like is that you've taken something that like again like it's people say it's on the softer side of
It's
things, right?
squishy. Yeah.
It's squishy, right? It's amorphous. It's all
Yeah.
intangibles, all the stuff out there, right
Yeah.
there. And I
Yeah.
know that a lot of trailblazers listening to this, they've achieved so much like externally that they're like, but the real key is something that is squishy, right? And
Hmm.
so like on two ends, one as a leader, I'm going to recommend that you read both books, just so you can have those skill sets. But two, Maria's done something here that most of us haven't figured out, which is how do you turn these squishy things into something that might feel tangible for other people? And
Yeah.
then once you get them bought in, there's still new problems that need to be solved. And
Yeah.
I think that like there's something in just that framing of
Yeah.
you doing that. Like I want to acknowledge you on that. And I think that like most of us miss those two steps and we
Yeah.
wonder why people can't bring it all in. So just really
Yeah.
want to call that out here, outliers,
Yeah, no, I
as
love
listening in.
that because we'll get into the definition of empathy in a moment, but I didn't set out to do that. I had initially just set out to just make the business case for empathy because clearly the moral imperative wasn't enough. And so it's like, okay, let's meet people where they are. And what do they care about? They care about the bottom line, they care about results. And so I take a very results driven approach to empathy of let's make this real and practical in the workplace. And by the way, it's not what you might think it is, right? It doesn't mean you're crying on the floor with your employees. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but I think it's an important lesson for the trailblazers out there is that sometimes you just go where your heart leads you and you go where your fire and your passion lead you, and then that unlocks the next step. So for me, the years I spent researching the first book and coming up with the business case and the ROI, and then all of a sudden getting thrust into a world, I had been talking to heads of marketing before, and all of a sudden now I'm in a world where I'm talking to HR people and doing leadership development programs and all that kind of stuff because it's about also what you do on the inside, not just the outside. So all of a sudden I got into culture work. And it was from that work and listening and really listening to the people that the first book resonated with that I realized there's actually these two groups of people to serve. There's the skeptics and then there's the converts. And I didn't set out to do that, but the first book definitely was for skeptics. I didn't realize that there was going to be an add-on component that would help the converts actually finesse it and actually deal with the challenges that they had. So it seems like this master plan of like, oh, there's these two books that go together and it's a companion piece. It doesn't always happen that neatly. And I think the important lesson there is that you've just got to go out there and do the work, and then you're going to get the information. You're going to get the data and the feedback. And if you get curious and ask questions, which is a cornerstone of empathy, you'll stumble on what the next iteration of that movement or product or service or whatever it is looks like. So I just think that's a really important thing to point out to people.
Oh, I love this year. Like I promise you, we're gonna get into the empathy world because I want to
I know
know.
I'm like,
But
yeah,
well, there's some things you brought up here
yeah.
like really like you've seen things on some distinctions,
Hmm.
and part of what you're bringing in that's come to me is uh, there are two elements. One is the inner outer game,
Hmm.
and the other part of it is like knowing your customer. Like and I'll talk about both of them from what I'm hearing from you. The first one here is like it's like when it is when you talk about like marketing, I think about
Hmm.
that from an organization standpoint as like the outer game. How do we bring new
Hmm.
people in? How are we seen outside of our organization? And
Right.
then you're like, okay, we took care of that, but then there was like, how do we actually market to our own employees? How do we actually get that to
Yeah.
happen internally? And you
Yeah.
brought it into the inner game with the empathy dilemma. Let me check in with you. Does that feel
Well, and it's
like
actually flipped. So
ooh,
my work with brand was always about brand starts from the inside out.
mm,
So you can put a veneer on any company, but that's not sustainable and that's not going to create loyalty and longevity. So really what you've got to do is you've got to create a strong foundation first. And that's why any company that's trying to be any sort of brand externally, whatever it is, you've got to be walking the talk internally. And the struggle with a lot of companies is they talk a big game about customer centricity or empathy for their customers, or customers service is our number one priority. But internally, and I just wrote an article for Forbes about this, customer experience is directly correlated with employee experience. And so if you don't have your house in order on the inside, and this goes for an organization, but it also goes for us as individuals. If we don't have our house in order on the inside, and we're not grounded and we're not present and we're not walking the talk internally, then the external is just a facade. And people see through that very quickly, especially in our day and age. So it's actually something where if you know this is something you want to create and present to the world, you've got to actually work on the foundation of it first, right? It's like a house, it's like a building. It's only as strong as the foundation. So this is the thing a lot of people get wrong with marketing is like, well, I just want to go do the tactics and I want to do all the stuff that's going to make me famous and I want to do all the stuff that's going to make me go viral, but they're not working on putting the building blocks in place internally of like, well, what are our policies? What are our values, and real values, not just like a list of things on the wall, but how do we treat each other internally? How do we hire? How do we reward? How do we model? How do we celebrate? Once you get that baked, then you can create an external perspective that's real. That's, and this is what we talk about when we talk about authentic brand. It's not some magical thing. Like authentic is whatever it is for you, but it just means that the inside matches the outside. So yeah, just to make a slight tweak on what you said,
This is
it's
great.
really about understanding that it can't just all be out there. It's got to happen. And for us as individuals, empathy starts with my own self-assessment, my own self-care. Like, where am I? What are my emotional triggers? What are my strengths? What are my challenges? What are my perception gaps? And how do I put my ego aside so that I can actually make space for someone else's perspective? So when we get a moment, this will all make sense because then I can explain what we mean by empathy.
You know what, Maria? Like
Yeah.
as you're saying it, like we will get that moment, and like I feel like
Yeah.
I'm like, I was like, give it to me now, right? But there's something I like to say, which uh, it really comes down to like the demonstration of it,
Yeah.
right? Because we might come up with a definition. I'm really excited to hear it. Like, it's
Hmm.
like Maria, you might as well just tell me because like I feel like it's the elephant in the room. But and allies, I want you to pay attention to this. Like you get what empathy means to Maria by all the examples, the questions, the way that you're going about this. Like, I'm getting already a mosaic of what this means. I'm excited to see what it like how you would describe
Hmm.
it clearly, but like or concisely, I would say. But like, it is already clear to me. The picture of
Hmm.
it is already coming, and
Hmm.
like the it's not just what the examples you're saying, but it's how we're having the conversation, right?
Hmm.
Like this to me is already in the space of this. I absolutely love it. There's another point I'll make, but I think we just like let's give outliers what they want. Can you please let us know what empathy means
Yeah.
to you if you're going to define it?
Yeah. And like I said, there's lots of different definitions. So if you look in the dictionary, it's going to say something different, right? But really, the lens through which I do my work is that empathy is the ability to see, understand, and where appropriate, feel another person's perspective, and to then use that information to act with compassion. So compassion is empathy in action, but I have to have the empathetic lens first before I can decide, I have to gather the information from you before I can determine what is the next right step that we should take together. What's the next right thing I can do for you? And that's an act of compassion. What empathy is not is just being nice. Like you can be really nice, but not see another person's perspective. It's not caving into unreasonable demands because that's submission and acquiescence. And empathy gets conflated with that all the time. We get leaders burning themselves out because there's in the name of empathy, but really they're just people pleasing. They're not actually confidently practicing empathy to try to understand someone's point of view and take a next step with them as a result, right? And then it's also not agreeing with someone. So you can have an empathetic conversation with someone you don't agree with because you're willing to see and understand their context. But you don't have to be I something I always say is empathy is about connection, not conversion. It's not about necessarily making you come around to my viewpoint about strategy or budget or worldview or ideology, right? It's about help me understand how you got to where you are. And even if I say I still don't agree, I can say, but it makes sense to me how you got to where you are. And now we can actually have a conversation instead of talking past each other. So that's why, when we look at it from that definition, it makes more sense in the workplace because it's about how do we open ourselves up to different points of view, which data tells us, DEI, all the data shows us leads to better business decisions because there's other people that look at things differently. And if they do, they're able to spot risks or opportunities that I might miss. So if you don't have empathy fueling those efforts at inclusion and diversity, you just a bunch of people staring at each other who can't understand each other, right? It also is that ability to then say, I'm going to make a tough business decision with empathy. It's not about me pleasing everybody on my team or in my company or my even my clients, but I can communicate that. I can listen to their point of view. I can find the way to support them through the decision, but it doesn't mean I have to change my mind. And if that's, we're dealing with this a lot with companies that are making some policy decisions and it's, they if it's return to office, let's say, they get to make that decision. They run the company. So they can do it really cruelly where it's like, hey, starting tomorrow, everyone's got to be back in the office. We don't care if you have childcare. We don't care if you're dealing with your commute. Or they could choose to communicate that decision in a way that brings people along and that opens the door to, well, tell us what your concerns are. Tell us what some of the challenges are going to be for you to come to the office every day, and let's figure out a way to move forward together that's maybe a little bit different than what we had in mind, but the decision is happening. So how can we best support you through the decision? That's where empathy comes in.
So there's a number of different things that are flowing through me as you come in. One of these things, I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is in like the empathy dilemma. Where it comes up, like one of the things in my mind is like, but this seems like it's going to take a lot longer. Like it's a lot easier to just go and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
come in." You know,
Yeah.
um, let's.
And we
There's.
can, I mean, command and control has been around for a long time,
Mhm.
but it's also about what is the investment you're willing to make. So if you want to get compliance and not engagement or innovation, if you want to put everybody in a position of being in an environment of fear and anxiety and dread, you can do that. It's not going to be sustainable and you're going to lose out on people's creativity, innovation, and ultimately they're going to leave. So yes, you have to spend some time with trying to get to know people, with slowing down a second, taking a pause before you react. And all of that is just an investment in driving results further later on. I always like to tell people, putting together a strategy takes a long time too. But most people, hopefully, put together a strategy before they dive into tactics. So it's the same thing. It's you've got to plant those seeds and put that investment in place so that your team operates at maximum capacity, right? It takes me a long time to charge up my phone, but I do it because I want my phone to be operating at optimal capacity. If you want your team and your organization to run at optimal capacity, you're going to have to take a second. You're going to have to take a beat and say, let's gather input. Let me leave space to listen to people and consider their perspective. Let me be, more clear in my communication, which might, I always say clarity is actually empathetic because then people know where they stand, right? Maybe it takes me longer to draft that email or to run the meeting or to put together my agenda, but that time is time well spent because the return you're going to get from that is much larger.
There's I love this component here. So in a former life, I studied to be an actuarial consultant, and I used to take a lot of different exams while I was working. And one of the things that I came out of this year, I failed a lot of exams. I passed a lot of exams too.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking to myself, there's time with the big T and time with the little t. And
Hmm.
time with the big T being time with the little t being like, how many hours did I spend for this exam? If it was 300 hours that I was needed, I'm like, I think I could do it in 250, you know? But
Yeah.
then time with the big T is how many times did I have to study for the exam altogether and put in 250 twice? So I put in 500, like my, not only that, but the exam was only offered every 6 months. So
Yeah.
like if I had just put in 50 hours more in the first place, I would have gotten through those clips. You probably wouldn't be talking to me right now because I would have been on actuarial path and just being,
Yeah.
you know, but I think about that a lot. And like
Yeah.
as I'm hearing you say this, it feels like time with the big T, time with the little T. Like
Yeah.
what is the cost to the organization? What's the cost to you to have kind of two things here from what I'm hearing from like disengaged employees. One of them being you have employees who leave, which like there's loss of productivity, there's costs
Right.
associated with that, but there's also the cost of like having to go find someone, the spot not being filled, and then
Yep.
the onboarding time. When they
Yes.
come on, they don't come back in at the same level. So
And
and
the
the
loss of,
relationships lost.
yeah, the loss of the institutional knowledge. It's expensive
It's
to keep
very
hiring
expensive,
people. So if you
very
want to
expensive.
churn and burn, that's one strategy. It's not very smart, but
And
you can do
so
it, I guess.
so I like this. I like this element because I was thinking about that, and then something in my mind was like, and in some ways that becomes even fortunate for the people who are there but aren't bringing the creativity, innovation, and are just kind of like keeping things along because they're there. You're not paying the upfront cost, but you're losing
Mhm.
the opportunity cost. You only get
Yeah.
what you get from it, and
Yeah.
I'm realizing like as we're talking, I'm like, oh, there's just like all these, well, not all, they're not invisible. I was going to say they were invisible, but it's like no, there's an actual real dollars and cents compared to this year, like
100,
because like
100%. Yeah.
this is where like there are organizations that have figured this out to
Yeah.
whatever extent that they have. They've found their ways to be empathetic in their own ways,
Yeah.
and those organizations are leading industries and taking things to new heights and new levels. Let me check in with you. Like this is from my
Yeah.
past experience. This is where I'm like, oh, I can see how all this is playing out. Let me know like how aligned am I? How resonant is this?
I think you're really aligned. I just published another article recently on Forbes that there's a study that comes out every year. It's called the State of Workplace Empathy Report. It's done by Business Solver, and folks can find it on their website. But they've been doing this study on empathy for 10 years, so they have trend data to look at. And this year they said basically the empathy gap in your organization, just or in organizations, kind of on average, costs $180 billion in attrition and rehiring, reskilling, retraining, all of that. That is something a CFO and a CEO need to pay attention to, no matter how fluffy they think things might be. And again, I kind of go back to this concept for me because it's funny because I'm a very creative right brain person. I'm not necessarily super data driven or whatever. But for me, it's so much about practicality because if you look at how an organization or business, or even if you're like a solo business owner, right? How much time and energy and money you spend in making sure your equipment and your capital expenditures are operating at peak capacity, right? Your computer, your phones, your printers, your whatever, if you have a warehouse, like everything. And yet, without empathy, we're creating an environment where our most important asset, our people, are operating at a fraction of their capacity. And we're okay with that, right? So I'll just give you like a really interesting statistic. There was a study done a few years ago by an organization called Catalyst, and they had two groups of thousands of groups of workers. One group self-selected that they had an empathetic boss or an empathetic culture, that they were working in one. The other group said, no, we're not. We don't work for an empathetic person. We're not in an empathetic culture. And then they asked those groups the same questions. And the delta for questions like, I am able to be innovative at work, for the empathetic group was 60% of them said, yeah, I'm able to be innovative at work. And what does innovation mean? It means new product and service introduction. It means creatively solving problems, all the good things, right? That give us competitive advantage. The non-empathetic group, only 13% of them said they could be empathetic at work. So again, I kind of go back to the phone analogy. Would you spend all night charging up your phone just to get to 13% capacity? We would never tolerate it for machines and other assets that we have. And yet we're overlooking this really important asset where all of our ideas and all of our market leading edge innovations come from. And that's our people.
Yeah, you like as you say this, it's good. It's good to talk to you about this here. It actually takes me to when I first started working, I joined a human capital team because you talk about the capital
Yeah.
expenditures. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
capital. It's just human capital.
It's
People
just
don't
human.
talk about it that way, but like
Yeah.
it just is. And yeah, so there's something in here.
Yeah.
I'm going to toss out something to any outliers and trailblazers that are listening that are like, oh, I don't have a team just yet. And
Right.
like, there's a couple different things that
Oh yeah, we
I
got
want to
we
say
got
to
it.
that.
We got good stuff for you too. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Like, all right, cool.
Yeah.
So I want to bring it in because one of them I know, I'm thinking about this from like even just like the elements of like being parts of masterminds, getting other people like who come and help you to
Mm-hmm.
be in spaces where you're able to listen and they're able to your partner, basically your
Mm-hmm.
partners
Your
are
partners.
are
Mm-hmm.
actually in the right scheme of things. But Maria,
Mm-hmm.
you obviously spend a lot more time thinking about this than I do. So like for those people who are having businesses that are on their
Mm-hmm.
way to having larger teams and so forth here, how does like the empathy edge and empathy, how does empathy play
Mm-hmm.
out for them?
Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, what I discovered through this journey was that empathy had been a competitive advantage for me my whole career. I just didn't realize it. I didn't call it that. I thought it was just curiosity. I thought it was just getting to know people and creating relationships, right?
Now I have to just like I'm so sorry, but like you said, you thought it was curiosity. So where would you say is the distinction between curiosity and
Well,
empathy?
curiosity is the number one trait of empathic people. But if you had asked me in my 20s, I wouldn't have said it was empathy. I would have said, I'm just really curious and I like to get to know other people that are outside of my functional area. As an example, I was working as a management consultant and I would spend a lot of time talking to the programmers and the engineers. I was building communication plans and training plans, but I sat down and was like, take me into your world, help me understand what is going on here. I did the same thing when I was in marketing for tech companies. I would meet with the tech folks, with the engineers, and say, I need to understand how this works so that I can talk about it. And and so that's about trying to see other perspectives and be open to the fact that I don't have all the answers, that other people have a lived experience and have experience in something that I don't. And I need to be open to understanding their perspective about things. So, and this served me very well when I launched my own business in 2008 because I'm dealing with clients, I'm dealing with partners. I have no formal relationship or title to get them to quote unquote listen to me, right? The only influence I have is if I make a connection. So, to everyone listening, that's the only thing you have when you're working by yourself and you don't have a team. I think it's especially hard for leaders that have matrixed teams, right? You're not holding the purse strings to their salary. You don't get to decide what their performance review says. They don't have to listen to you if they don't want to. And that's where you actually need to lean into empathy so that you can create a relationship with them where you build trust, where they feel heard, they feel seen, and they want to engage with you. So it's actually more important if you don't have the title and you don't have the team and you're not holding people's careers in your hand. Because that's the only way you start a movement. That's the only way you build a solopreneur business. And that's the only way you attract partners that are like, I want to work with you over this other person because you see me and I feel heard. There's actually a study with successful salespeople that was done several years ago. I think it was through USC, and they tried to figure out what are the most important skills for successful salespeople, right? And if you're selling an idea, you are a salesperson. If you're a solopreneur, you're a salesperson, right? What they found was it wasn't how well they knew the pitch. It wasn't even how well they knew the product. It was a combination of empathy and ambition because they could actually have conversations with people. And there's a body of research out there that says we do business with people we like. We do business with people where we see ourselves reflected through their eyes and we feel that we can trust them, right? So you could be a salesperson for the company that's in second place, But if you create a strong enough relationship, they don't care that the other person's product is better. They're going to want to work with you, right? So that's a really great question. And I'm glad we kind of went there because it becomes even more important when you're a lone wolf and you're trying to accomplish things because you've got to build alliances, you've got to build relationships, and you've got to build, client engagements for people, customer engagements for people where they're like, I want to be loyal to you. There's another study that shows that 8 out of 10 people care about empathy most of all in the customer experience, even when their problem is not solved. That's huge, right? So I'm sure a lot of folks out there are independent. They're, like I said, they're lone wolves. And that's where you really need to rely on your empathy skills and your curiosity and your ability to just focus and listen and give people space to be heard.
So, like Maria, I'm glad we went there, right? I think, and I
Me
think it's
too.
really great. Like,
Yeah.
and it's these things where I think that what was coming to my mind is like, oh, this is like influence. Like,
Yeah.
this is like being able to leverage influence in an amazing way,
Right.
and to use the advantage that comes with it. And what I'm
And I
hearing from
should
you,
say in a
yeah,
responsible way, right? Because we know empathy can also be used to manipulate.
uh,
Sociopaths leverage empathy to manipulate, right? So if you know you have genuine you have a genuine intention to provide value to someone, that's how you build a relationship is through empathy. Not to manipulate them, but to connect and engage with them.
yeah. I'm glad you said it. And it's like I'm glad you said it because it's like I'm like yeah. Um, but I also want to put out one thing, and then I'm going to go back to things. We're going to start wrapping up, but I want to make sure we don't miss your journey as well in here
Mm-hmm.
because you started out in 2008 around this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what gets me here is I'm like, well, 2008 was not a great year to
No.
like a lot of people would be like, that's not a good year to start things. That's like so on and so forth. And so there's an element of me that wants to capture that. I also just want to like just note how you talked about like, hey, I'm very right brain. I like to be really creative. And yet in this conversation, you did make it a point to like to share a lot of different studies that were there, a lot of different like stats and story tell at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
where it was like engaging in here. And I just want to kind of point this out here for us outliers as well, where it's like there are like just the multitude of skills that you bring in to make sure that like it can be clear and that you can
Mm-hmm.
reach various audiences and so forth. And I think that like there's something I think the reason I'm pointing this out, Maria, is I feel like when you do have something that might be more squishy, like
Yeah.
we don't get the benefit or let me say
Yeah.
this, it becomes even more important to
Yeah.
be able to leverage all the tools in the toolkit to be able
Mm-hmm.
to help someone come on board or to be
Yeah.
able to help them see themselves in there. I think that you do a really good job of this, and I want to point this out for outliers here
Mm-hmm.
because I get that it doesn't just happen. I get that this is like intentionally worked on, intentionally
Mm-hmm.
cultivated, and then made even stronger through your ability to see and dive into something you really believe in and know is like just a huge competitive advantage, which is empathy,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm like in my mind, I'm like, oh, is he being empathetic to the people who like to hear things through stats and stuff? Like, is that allowing that to come through as a clearer way of hearing this
Yeah.
and just, while still staying practical? Like
Right.
to me, you're just in the action of it. It's like a
Yeah.
just a full demonstration of it. Anything you want to
Thank
say to
you.
that, Maria?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that's where I love to do talks and leadership workshops and things like that, because I try to explain to people that number one, the research shows that we as human beings are born with empathy. It's innate to us, barring certain outlying psychopathies, right? But for the most part, it is how our species has survived through empathy and collaboration. But what happens is the muscle weakens for some people, whether they're raised or they work in environments where it's punished, it's not rewarded, it's not modeled, it's not celebrated, right? The muscle atrophies. For other people the muscle's really strong. Maybe they've been in a workplace that's really encouraging and models empathy all the time and really shows people that this is the way to success. So two things on that. One is, it's the good news is you can build that muscle just like any muscle. So the reason that I do a lot that I do around the ROI and the data and the stats is because I also want people to understand that empathy can look different. Like it doesn't have to be touchy feely, like I said, crying on the floor with your employees. Empathy can be communicating clearly. Empathy can be factoring in multiple points of view, synthesizing that, and then making a swift decision. That's empathetic. Career progression maps are empathetic. A clear outline of goals and responsibilities and milestones is empathetic because you don't leave people in the dark. So, from a neurodiversity standpoint as well, you can tap into empathy by simply just what does the other person need right now? What does the other person want to know? What support do they need? And so if you're less comfortable with the like, oh, my next right step is to give them a hug, like, I don't know if I want to give them a hug, right? Like, I'm not a hugger. That's okay. You can still show empathy and like, I hear you. I see you. That must be really tough right now. Tell me more about that. All of those things are ways to have conversations in an empathetic way that don't have to require you to break down in tears, basically.
Yeah, no, that feels really right. It feels really right there, and I appreciate it there. And there's something that came up that when you were saying it, where I'm like, you had said something earlier that I thought was really interesting. You said like when appropriate. You had said something there like
When appropriate,
like feeling
right?
when appropriate, right? And there's some
Yeah,
things where it's like actually being able to stay in your like embodied in your leadership while also saying this seems really hard,
exactly.
like there's something in there that actually feels more not just appropriate for like what's workplace appropriate,
Right.
but for like a leader I can trust, depend on,
Yeah,
and who actually has my back
right.
in here. And it's so interesting to be able to hold the dichotomy of both of them and
Yeah.
play. But you
And
got
that's the balance that's hard, right? And so, when I've interviewed military leaders on my podcast, The Empathy Edge, they talk about the fact that, command and control has its place, but it's not 24/7, not even in the military. It's really about empathy and getting to know your people because they need to trust you and know that you see them and value them because they're going to lay down their life for you as a general or as a lieutenant, right? So you need to we talked about time earlier. You need to invest that time in creating that relationship. So when you're in the heat of battle, it you're going to be believed. You're going to be like, yes, I will do it. I will do whatever needs to be done. I spoke to a C-level exec for my book who talked about the fact that once he started injecting a little bit more camaraderie and levity, because joy is one of my pillars of being an empathetic and effective leader, he's like, yeah, I intentionally cultivate that because I want them to be in an environment they enjoy being in and to trust me. So when I have to ask them to do the hard thing, they know I wouldn't be asking unless there was a good reason. And that's the number one thing of all of like any of our relationships, right? You build up that goodwill, you build up that bank account. So when you need to draw from it, people are like, "What do you need?
Yeah,
I got you."
yeah, that makes sense. You don't want to draw and go into the negatives.
Exactly.
It might be a large withdrawal, but when
Yeah,
you've put in a whole lot into the account, it doesn't
totally.
feel like that.
Right.
So Maria, let's do this. We're going to wrap up here. We're coming up to the top of the hour, and I make sure we have some time and space here. So the way that there's two things we're going to do. Firstly, I'm going to ask you outliers. Like this is one of those conversations that changes the game, right? So like if one, get the two books. So I'm going to make sure I just say that explicitly. Like, I want you to get this. I think it's going to be part of what we talk about inside of our space. So the more you know about this, the more that we can leverage it. Two, this is a kind of conversation where there's likely someone in your life who is like trying to navigate this, who is struggling as a leader, struggling in their organization, struggling in their business, and there may be some things where you could see and you're like, I just want you to get it, or you just like there may be just a different way that goes through. But my ask is this: think of that person and send them this episode. I have this thing that we call the one person, one conversation at a time initiative. And it's like, I have a feeling that this thing doesn't like, it isn't about sharing it out with the world. It's about making sure that
Mm-hmm.
the person who needs to hear this receives the gift of this conversation and is able to
Mm-hmm.
leverage that to make some important changes. So that's my
Mm-hmm.
invitation to you. Please do. If you do it, it will mean the world to us. So, Maria, we're going to end with you on this here. What I
Mm-hmm.
like to do is do two things. One, let Outliers know how they can go deeper down the journey with you.
Yeah.
And just like, we're all in a lot of different places. So let us know like some of the
Right.
best places to go for that. One or
Right.
two of the best places. And then the way that I end every conversation is by putting the outliers to the side. Now this is important here, right? So like they've gotten what they need to get from this conversation, right?
Uh-huh.
My ask here is, what did you get from this conversation? In what way, like, what is an insight that you are taking away from this here, simply on behalf of yourself? And that's how
Yeah.
we'll wrap up the conversation,
Yeah,
right? So,
absolutely.
would you mind sharing?
I would not. I would love that. I think the best place is you can go to, given my most recent book, you can go to theempathydilemma.com. That's Dilemma. And you can, that's actually a page on my website. So you can find the new book there, but you can also download a free chapter of the book there in case you're not committed to it yet. You can join my email list. And on that site, you can find my podcast. You can find how to bring me into your group or your association or your team to speak and do a presentation, even a leadership development workshop. And then I just also ask folks to tune into my podcast, The Empathy Edge, which airs every week. And I am in conversation with change makers, C suite, HR, social activists, people looking at empathy from all different facets, and how it can bring us closer and create more engagement and connection, whether it's at work or in the world. So that's another place folks can find me.
Awesome. And then if we come in and you just shared an insight you had, if any, and like don't
Yeah.
don't feel like you need to just make something up if it's not
Yeah,
there.
no, I really appreciated your distinction of time with a big T and time with a little t. Because I
Mhm.
think that's fundamentally the challenge is we spend a lot of time little t on the stuff that doesn't matter and doesn't actually move us forward when we actually need to be clearing the decks and spending the time on the big T. And that's something I always challenge. And I'm challenged myself of doing that. I have to go through that exercise too, because I'm wasting a lot of time on things I shouldn't be wasting time on. But if you are a leader of a group or you're managing a team, if you don't think you have time with the big T for making these connections with your team, I just want to ask you to look at where you're prioritizing your time, because in the age of AI, if you're hiding behind the doing and the tasks, you're going to be out of a job. If you learn how to get to know people, motivate them, encourage them, support them, that's the skill set you're going to need moving forward. So I would really just challenge you of, are you really prioritizing your time in the way that you should? If you think you don't have time to be empathetic with the people that matter.
I love how confronting that is, and I'm gonna let's leave that out here for us to think through here, right? To really let sit in. Maria, I appreciate you. Thank you for your bringing your expertise and your experience to the conversation, and for growing in both of them, so that we can not just hear about what you know, but see what it looks like when you show up in consistent and aligned action around it. I appreciate you. And Outliers,
Thank
until the
you.
next time we talk, journey on.